Yes, well, good morning, Veronica. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate that. It's yeah, great to be able to have a chance to chat.
Thank you for inviting me. Good morning.
Good morning to you. So maybe to start, I wanted to pick up on one of your recent quotes that I saw, which I found really, yeah, quite fascinating and inspiring. And your quote was, "Sound is political, not just a beautiful decoration. Sound is agency and transformation. Sound is change." And I'm really curious your thoughts on that. So, like, what does it mean for you for sound to be political, for sound to be change?
Well, first of all, I will say that sound it's political in the sense of giving a voice. It's something that when you do sound, you can say things, you can make yourself visible, you can show others as visible. You can also put silence as part of sound, as political as well. Silence is also political, I will say. But the way I understood it is sound as a voice of human expression. So in
Okay.
that voice, now when you express something with sound, you can tell different things. You can also say nothing. That's also
Hmm.
political as well. No?
Hmm.
In that sense, that's how I see it. Sound can be incredibly political when you use it for visibility, for human expression.
Okay, okay. And what about sound is change? Do you see political and change? I mean, obviously, people might try to make change through politics, but there's other ways of making change as well. Do you see those things as connected through sound?
Absolutely, there is a correlation, I will say, because we are changing all the time. That's the
Mm-hmm.
only thing that remains, change. And change can be, it goes in different directions. No, change can be something positive, but it can also be a regression. Now, in terms of sound, the way I see it is how can you make sound change
Mm-hmm.
or turn it into change. In my case, for instance, sound has always changed me via music. I remember, for instance, the generation of the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, even the 90s. With music, through
Mm-hmm.
music, you can send your voice, express something. You can do poetry as well. You can for me, I have attended concerts that were incredibly transformative for
Mm-hmm.
me because first of all I felt identified, acknowledged. I share like the concerns or the feelings,
Mm-hmm.
and these kind of experiences can be very, very transformative.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, when we use sound, for instance, at the moment with bioacoustics, no? You can also give voice to plants or to animals. And this interaction can also be transformative because we are giving voice to other species, our companion species, for instance. And that's also transformative
Mm-hmm.
to give them a voice when you give visibility to birds or give visibility to species that are in extinction, for instance. That's somehow that you can use sound for transformation.
Mm-hmm.
It can transform the person that listens to what you are saying or
Mm-hmm.
what you are doing, no? And it can impact other people. You cannot control as a producer, as a sound artist, as a sound designer, you cannot control what is the resonance of your work. That it's a remark that I should do. Now
Mm-hmm.
that you cannot, because you do something, you are sure that the result of that something is going to be X or Y.
Mm-hmm.
It's out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes the resonance of your work can be a revolution even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's fascinating because when I hear you talk about that, you talked about the sound as transformation, but it's interesting when you talked about the events and the concerts. And I'm reminded of a story that Billy Bragg has often told about when he got into politics and music. That actually occurred because he attended when the Clash was playing a Rock Against Racism show in London back in I guess it's maybe the late 80s. And that was his first introduction to this idea that, oh, actually music and politics could actually go together. So it's interesting. Sometimes it can be the sounds themselves, but also the venue or the environment or the community or the concert can be transformative as well.
Absolutely. I remember when I was, I was 17, 18 years old, I got some punk music tapes, some compilations from London.
Mhm,
At that time, I could not speak English. I could not understand it. But someone gave me some tapes by a Spanish punk
mhm,
from the 70s, which in Spanish, and they were incredibly, I mean, the lyrics explain me how the capitalist system functions.
mhm,
There was also gender politics. There was also a lot of nihilism and existentialism.
mhm,
And for my age, that gave a voice of what I was feeling, but I was not able, because of my age, I was
mhm,
not able to understand. I was not able to put it a voice.
mhm,
But these people made me, and that's why I love punk music, because
mhm,
for me it was an existential revolution. It
mhm,
opened to me understanding of the world. It opened for me also the possibility to put out my anger,
mhm,
particularly in the 90s, in the Reagan era, that
mhm,
it was incredibly violent. No, and when I look also at the music that I was listening as a child, just as a spectator in the 70s, I mean, I was born in the late 70s,
mhm,
but that generation, the hippie movement and all these things, the rock music, even, Led Zeppelin and all these things, the Doors and all these, even the Beatles,
mhm, mhm,
they are the voice sound as music, as the voice of a particular context, and
mhm,
it we always somehow, even if we, whether we want it or not, we reflect our historical context in the music. The
mhm,
music is always a reflection of what's going on around us. And for
mhm,
instance, just to finish in this answering these questions, at the moment, for instance, we see a strong resonance in the European context, in the Western context, of techno, for instance.
mhm,
Techno is becoming the soundtrack of our age,
mhm,
our technological age.
mhm,
And that's also a reflection of what's going on around us. That's
mhm.
also, whether we want it or not, it's kind of a reflection of the situation.
Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned techno, because one of the questions I wanted to ask you about was techno in the sense of technology, which is sort of relation from those words. And I think live electronic music, or not even just live, but actually produced electronic music, is kind of interesting lens to think about technology and sustainability as well. Because coming from a sustainability world, there's a lot of technology and sustainability, and it's also often presented in sort of a techno optimism world where
Mhm.
technology will save us. We just need more solar panels, or carbon removal stuff from the air, or and also the people, like the tech bros in Silicon Valley. The Elon Musk will save us. Jeff Bezos will save us. So technology is really put as a savior very, very much. But in some of your writings, and actually interestingly your music as well, you've taken a bit of a different approach, and actually even looked at technology and science fiction, and even getting back to Isaac Asimov, which for me was amazing to read about, because I grew up reading those those science fiction stories from the 50s and 60s. So I'm curious. You talked about techno, but I'm also curious how you think about techno and technology connected in your music, and how that's connected to sustainability as well.
Well, that's a interesting reflection, because, and a fantastic topic, a very current topic to talk about, because in my case, I shared, I did my bachelor thesis on Donna Haraway, and she's a scientist who researches technoscience,
Mhm,
technology and science. And but she was writing in the 70s and in the 80s, and until the 90s, and she's still alive, she's
mhm,
still around. But there are other different voices, and I'm gonna go to, for instance, the first science fiction tale, which is Mary Shelley with Frankenstein. So
mhm,
these women have been around since a very long time, putting a critique on technoscience, no,
mhm,
the use of science and technology in order to discover other worlds, in order to for longevity, in order to to make this world better, or to build this kind of Frankenstein that never dies, or um, so these kind of reflections, I will say, come not only from male authors, but also female authors that have been since a long time pointing the question of what does it mean to put together science and technology, and
mhm,
what are the risks, no? How can this end, let's say, no?
Right.
And that's in the territory of speculative literature, no?
Mm.
Science fiction.
Mm.
But in the case of Asimov, I really like Asimov, particularly because he was a scientist. He wrote a lot of science fiction as a scientist or from the scientific perspective.
Mm.
And there is a documentary that I recommend to our audience to check out. It is on Arte, and it's an interview in a documentary about Asimov. And he points out to the question of technoscience as a
Mm.
scientist. No? And what I found fascinating, and this is the perspective that I also share, and also Donna Haraway talks about it, is this constant ambivalence in the terrain of technoscience. What that means is they are saying that science and technology has let's say, two different ways to go. They are not only thinking in dichotomic terms, but let's say there are two perspectives. We can use science and technology under an ethical frame, thinking about social problems and the solution of those social problems,
Mm.
and make things better for everyone.
Mm.
That's a possibility, and it is possible, no? Or these new technologies and new epistemologies can be incredibly destructive.
Mm.
They can be used for war, for surveillance, for social control, for domination, for colonialism and imperialism.
Mm.
There is always, and Asimov and Donna Haraway, even Shelley, Mary
Mm.
Shelley, they all talk about this, or Octavia Butler in Afrofuturism. No? They are always aware of this ambivalence.
Mm.
This thing, this new toy, can go in different ways. It can go in a positive way, but it can be also incredibly destructive.
Mm.
So that is how I see it. No? That's also my position, that we need to consider both territories.
Mm.
This is not only about this is something positive and look, now we have this and oh, so great. No, 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 no. We need to see also what is not great about it. And Elon Musk and even Silicon Valley, they are fantastic examples of how grown this can get. Silicon Valley began in the 60s, 70s, end of the 60s, I think, as an alternative hippie kind of, scientific, technological utopia.
Mm.
What has become today in 2014 is a total dystopia. It's a corporation, it's people that are been using their technological knowledge in order to build machines that are very dangerous, artificial intelligence. And the problem of what makes a technology dangerous, we could ask, no? Because it's also what do I mean by dangerous or by bad. Important is that it's not a moral argument. It's more an argument in relation to life, actually, in relation to human beings, in the relation to the animal kingdom, in relation to earth, to the use of resources, to survival, basically. No? That's the way how I see it in that kind of critical frame. Now, Silicon Valley has turned in a place that is training or is been using technological knowledge in order to rule a machine, which is the United States, no? And Zuckerberg, for instance, with Facebook, it's the control of the human psyche, the control of opinions, no? The control of political meanings. That can be it is very, very incredibly dangerous. Elon Musk is another example of it. He is a person, he's not a scientist, but he's an investor that has the money and is stealing all the knowledge from his slaves. And he takes credit for everything because he puts the money. That itself, it's a bad example. No, it's a person that is stealing knowledge or paying for it. And another thing is also that he's looking at Mars, and so it's like, the fantasy of, but that fantasy, it's not really thinking about what's going on here on Earth. And we have Elon Musk building cars here in Brandenburg, in Germany. And there is an scandal going on because he's using a lot of waters. He's basically draining the waters in here close to Berlin. And this is something that we need to be aware of. This is something that we need to discuss. Why? Because it affects us all. That's the point. These questions and the critical perspective is not about good and bad or about jealousy. It's more really the question of what is the future that we are leaving to the coming generations. In my case, I am a parent. I have a son. He's 11 years old. And I do care about the world that my son is going to live in 10 years, not that far away.
Yeah, there's so much there. Maybe a couple of things I wanted to pick up on. So you mentioned earlier, you talked about nihilism, and a few minutes ago you mentioned utopia. And I think it's interesting, that connection to nihilism and utopia, and even thinking about Mars and the current. And it's kind of a good segue, because I wanted to ask you about your latest album, Nihil, which obviously has, from the title, some of those themes in there. So before we get into that, let's play one of the tracks from that album. This is Utopie and Widerstand. Okay, so what were we hearing there? That we listened to Utopia and Widerstand, and my German pronunciation is
No
really
worries.
not good, so I hope I got that right. So yeah, can you tell us about what we were hearing in that track?
Yeah, that's Utopia und Widerstand, and
Mm,
it can be translated, I mean, Utopia and
mm.
resistance.
Utopia and
Uh,
resistance. Okay.
yes. And it's basically about how you build utopia and how you resist
Mm,
dystopia. No,
mm,
and if you look at, I made a video for it,
mm,
and this was a kind of, it began as a sonic reflection first, thinking about Elon Musk
mm,
and his dream of conquer Mars.
mm,
No, actually that was for me, like, because I am a very critical towards a subject like Elon Musk, because
mm,
he really is the symbol of this kind of patriarchal white
mm,
figure with money and power
mm,
that can be incredibly destructive
mm,
for everyone, not only
mm,
for his family or for
mm.
Grimes.
Yeah.
But you know, that's how the track began,
Mm,
thinking about this fantasy of these males, patriarchal fantasies of going to Mars. But then I was thinking, okay, we are looking at Mars far away from Earth, and Mars as if it was a possibility of a paradise,
mm,
far away there, and it might become a paradise for the very rich, no,
mm,
but not for the poor.
mm, mm,
And there I can think of the film Total Recall, that
mm,
I also recommend, that was shot in Mexico City, where I come from. Fantastic movie. And when you look at the reality of Total Recall, for instance, they portray how the rich lives in Mars,
mm,
and how the very, very poor are, like, a repetition, basically, an extension of what we are experiencing here on Earth.
mm,
So for me, it's like no point to be thinking about Mars that far away when
mm,
things are already happening here. But my
mm,
point with this track was two things. One thing was to think about, why should we have been looking at the sky, another planet, as the potential paradise, when this is the paradise, actually.
mm,
We have here waters, we have fantastic, the animal kingdom is wonderful, we have forests, we have, the paradise is here in this
mm,
world. Instead of thinking of how can we go somewhere else, maybe we should focus on how can we keep what we already have.
mm,
So that was also my a reflection that I was doing. And instead to build the utopia in this world, in this planet, we need to resist. No,
mm,
we need to resist. And in the video, for instance, I put some pictures about different social movements, including Black Lives Matter and things, because everything is connected. It is an octopus. It is, everything is tentacular. Also in political and the techno science turn and all these things. Things are connected, and the social movements are also very fundamental for the build of a utopia.
mm,
Why? Because we are talking about how different groups can survive,
mm,
how different groups can, or should, maybe, we should stop killing certain groups, no,
mm,
certain groupings,
mm,
including the animal
mm,
kingdom,
mm,
no, because the problem here is also this ontological ladder that we have, or we believe in which some people are more important than others, and some people are the rulers, and the rest are the objects of domination. And that's something that we need to change in order to really work in a constructive way for keeping this planet. So
mm.
that was more or less the reflection I was doing in this tract.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, because I can hear in the track and also what you were talking about there, those themes of the extractive nature of the world, the inequity, power imbalances, themes of domination. And I've seen a couple of your posts. I mean, to me, it reminds me like a lot of those elements are sort of core elements of a colonialist or imperialist world where, yeah, some people are in charge, other people are not. Some people have resources, other people provide resources. And I've seen you posting a little bit and talking a little bit about your next album that you're working on, which I believe also has some of those themes embedded. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how those themes are kind of maybe showing up in your work is a bit too strong, maybe informing your work, or what pieces you're working on now?
Well, thank you for asking that question, because this is an album personally very precious for me, because that album Empire, it's gonna be called. I was thinking about changing the title
Mm-hmm.
because I found the title at some point. I was thinking maybe it's too obvious, too direct. But the thing is we need to contextualize what is the time frame of the production of the album. The album began right before Corona.
Mm-hmm.
Before Corona, I was in contact with a label in Manchester in the UK, super nice people, and they were like, let's do a collaboration together, let's put a record, and I was very, very happy. And then came Corona, no? Then came Corona, and somehow I could not finish the album
Mm-hmm.
for different reasons. One reason was emotionally, I could not. It is for a project called Specta Negra, and Specta Negra is a character, a figure that is an empowered person of color. So I did not have that power during Corona, you see, and I had to sometimes, I had a lot of sadness. Because many people die. It was a terrible pandemic that we resolved thanks to technoscience very fast, actually. And that's when you can think, okay, technoscience is not only bad, no?
Mm-hmm.
But then after Corona, we were kind of recovering. I had different tracks and things, but I was not really like kind of happy with all of it together. And then the label at some point told me, like, the owner of the label, he told me, like, my father just passed away of Corona, and he got into a very, of course, he was very sad and depressed, and he said, like, he stopped the label basically. And for me, that was also like, oh my goodness, no? Not in terms of the album, but more in the terms of emotional solidarity. And then I have also to stop the record, that's why, no? Because I was like, now I have to find another label. And I decided to somehow wait a little bit. Then came the war against the Ukraine right after. And that was also for me a knocking on the head, because I thought, like, what the heck is going on? That was the end of the Cold War, no? A new paradigm completely. So I had to process also that information. And then I realized, okay, the theme of Empire came first for the situation of England, actually, because I was working with people in Manchester, and we were trying to reflect these world things happening in England, no? Because it's an incredibly racist and hierarchical country, no? And it's the empire there is just like Brexit and all these things. It is very palpable. But then came Russia against the Ukraine, and then I thought, like, oh my goodness, this is really a thing going on here that I always thought that it will be, but now it's really, really happening. And then came also now the war with Israel and Palestine, in which this is the context where I finally finished the album. I found a German label that was like interested in the album. I just sent the album last week, and they say, okay, we're gonna release it. Now, that album has at the moment 11 tracks.
Okay.
And these 11 tracks come from the before Corona until now, the war between Israel and Gaza. All these tracks are a compilation of historical political happenings, no, including the pandemic. That's why this album is very precious for me, because it tells the story of empire expanding in different countries. It tells the story of technoscience. It tells the story of the problems that we are basically facing, that are many, many, many problems. But the root of the problem is a system, no? It's an economical system. It's capitalism, and it's really how capitalism functions and operates as an international empire, in which you have certain players which at the moment the players are kind of changing. There is a new paradigm. Now we are moving, it's not anymore the United States against Russia. Now it's different actors that are popping up now.
Mhm.
So there is a rearrangement at the moment,
Mm.
but there is something that remains the same. The imperialistic structural dominance that
Mm.
remains the same.
Mm.
And that's a reflection, that album is a
Mm.
reflection of all these new, the metamorphosis that the system is passing through, and the relocations of
Mm.
all these important international players.
Great. That's well. I can't wait to hear that. And I'm really curious, actually, what you mentioned about the title as well. When you said you're considering changing the title because it's too direct. And one of the things that I'm always curious about, and I ask everyone that I interview about this sort of tension or balance or spectrum maybe between sort of artistic intention and audience experience, where like as you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, music in the 60s, there's always been political music, but I think we've all experienced sort of the tension of on one hand art that is so obvious, so direct, it's almost like a propaganda poster, and you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then maybe the other end of the spectrum, the message is so esoteric and so intellectual that no one has any idea what the piece is even talking about if there was a message there. And I don't think either one of those is necessarily right or wrong or good or bad, but it's kind of a spectrum. So I'm curious how you see your own work or your own role as an artist of how important is it to be direct? How important is it that the message is kind of more subtle? How important is it that the audience really understands your intent? Or is it more important that you just feel that you've done your best as an artist and then it's kind of out of your control after you sort of release it or play your show? I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, in my case, that's why I can tell you, I have considered these questions now
Mm-hmm.
in my art specifically. And in my case, that's why I have different projects. I operate as my name, Verónica Mota, sound artist, no? Sound designer, more official for official context, in which in this context is more abstract and not that obvious, no?
Okay.
But I have Specta Negra that is more raw, more political, that I allow also myself to be more angry, also more violent. Also there is the theme of fetish culture and things like that, erotism, some kind. But also I have We Cyborgs, which is a new project in which that project is a little bit more queer orientated, more like more soft, more rainbow, you know. And I'm always moving from this kind of names and projects because I have different ways to formulate what I am feeling, feelings, ideas, reflections, critics, no, but also there are moments in which I just become totally abstract. I'm not trying to say anything at all. You know, and for me that has been the solution as a sound artist, basically to create different figures, and to, you know, to, from this figure, the anger, I can put the anger there. For this figure I can put more like the, you know, sonar, a sculpture that is reflected, I can put text.
Right.
And that's how I resolve that these questions. Because in my case, for instance, with the Specta Negra, some people love it, some people hate it. Why some people love it? Because they say you can be very direct and you go to the message, just political and no mercy. Other people hate it precisely because of
For
that.
the same reason. Yeah.
You know, and also another reflection is, I mean, I personally, I am not here to please people. I am here to do what I need to. I use sound and arts in order to express myself. First of all, is self-expression and creative expression. Often I don't know what I am doing, but many times, mostly of the time, I have an intention behind. I like to, because I come from sound design. I studied film and cinema, and I specialize in montage and then in sound design. And there you have a script, and you have a timeline, and you have to be very precise, and you are asked to produce certain feelings. Or for instance, when you are making sound design for horror movies, you have to scare the shit out of people.
Right.
You know, and you need to know what you are doing in order to produce it, right? right?
mm,
So I come from that corner that it's there is always an intention, that there is a
mm,
script, that you plan it in advance, that you reflect. But also I have other tracks and other situations in which I just do improvise,
mm,
you know, and what comes out of it, I don't know. And some people love it, some people hate it. But I
mm,
think in my case, the solution to this kind of things is just explore yourself, because at the end of the day, we are artists. We cannot take, you know, when you want to become a pop star,
mm,
then and please people and get followers, because that's okay, but that's
mm,
not me.
mm, mhm,
In my case, I want to keep my freedom and I want to be myself. And if I want to be direct, I want to
mm.
be direct. And if I don't, I don't. But the solution for me was to create different projects.
Okay, interesting. That's a really interesting approach. Which is actually maybe a good segue into, yeah, sort of our kind of a wrap up question. So right now we're recording this a week before your next performance at the event coming up. Sustain FM was part of the CTM Vorspiel and Transmedial Festival. And yeah, really looking forward to your performance here in
Thank you.
Berlin. So I'm curious, what do you have planned? I think I read something about a sound sculpture that you're looking to present. So yeah, I'm really curious to hear what you have in mind for that performance.
I am working at the moment on Octavia Butla, the mother of Afrofuturism. And in general,
Mm-hmm.
I did my bachelor thesis on Donna Haraway, and I like Octavia Butla now, but I also like Chela Sandoval, which is also a theorist working on what she calls oppositional consciousness. She's a Chicano theorist. And basically, in my case, I am trying to bring different female theories, not only, because, for instance, in the case of Empire, the album there, for me, a person I was reflecting on was the Italian philosopher Toni Negri.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote this book called Empire, which I have
Mm-hmm.
here. I can put you the reference later. No, I don't think you can see it yet.
Yeah,
But
that,
anyway,
yeah.
it's a big book. It's like a Bible, and for critical thinking. But yeah, the moment I'm trying to put together basically, and I have to explain that because it's fundamental to understand it, post-colonial thinking
Mm,
and feminism and cross-boarding critical epistemologies.
mm,
We have on one side Octavia Butla, which is coming from the literary corner,
mm,
um, and she's Afro-American
mm,
lesbian. That's important to say. Then we have Donna Haraway. She is a scientist, a philosopher, and she's Irish, white,
mm,
no? But it's a person that has been fighting for including other epistemologies from Afro-American
mm,
or Chicano
mm,
or Asian communities. And that's very important to
mm,
say, no? That is this person with epistemological privilege
mm,
that is giving visibility to other sisters that are doing fantastic theoretical work,
mm,
such as Octavia Butla
mm,
and Chela Sandoval.
mm,
Now, Chela Sandoval comes from the Latino corner in the United States, the Chicano corner, and she's also a theorist that's doing a lot on post-colonial studies.
mm,
So I am trying to entangle all these people, all these women, because for me, that's the future. That's kind of a Star Trek futurism,
mm,
no? It's not Star Wars, it's
mm,
more Star Trek in the
mm,
sense of shared epistemologies in
mm,
which we need to overcome race, we need to overcome class, we need to overcome gender, and we need to start like kind of collaborating and showing to the world that, and for instance, this interview, it's also another experience that
mm,
that kind of collaboration is possible.
mm,
No? So that's the idea behind. But then specifically for sustain, what I am trying to do is to build a world and a sculpture based on Octavia Butler, in which she's also questioning the meaning of the present and in the terms of reflecting the past, looking to the future in order to act in the present.
mm,
So these are the questions. It's Afrofuturism, basically,
mm,
moving like in different times, in a different time frame, back and forwards, you know,
mm,
in order to be of agency today. And I am using three I am now at the moment working on it,
Mm,
but one suggestion is, or one thing that I was thinking about was to create kind of a collage of extracts of the text of the parable of the Sawa. That's the text I
mm,
am basing this performance on. And I just did some recordings now, and maybe I create kind of text and create a mini collage out of that text, and then I wrote also my own response, no, which I hope I can read live.
mm,
I was
mm,
looking for it at the moment and I could not find it,
mm,
but that's because I have it here in another text. But so I wanna, on the one hand, put text by Octavia Butler, and on the other hand, give my own impulse, because that's also very important, that on that we understand other thinkers, but at the same time is very important, what do I have to say about it from my own perspective, no? Because
mm,
that's also what this is also about. It's not about repeating other people, but it's also like, okay, this impulse brought this reflection, and now out of these impulses, what is my own voice, no?
mm,
And that's what I am trying to do with sound art and music.
mm. That's great. Yeah, I can't wait to hear that performance. And it's interesting you mentioned about the jumping around in time, because we're recording this before the performance, and then we'll record the performance, and then this podcast will go live after the performance. So yeah, after we wrap up this interview here, you'll be able to hear the sound of Veronica's performance and hear what that sounds like. So yeah, that was awesome. Thanks very much for that conversation. We'll make sure to include, you mentioned actually quite a few authors and texts, so we can include the links to those in the show notes so that people listening can listen to those. And yeah, I can't wait to hear your performance. And yeah, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate the conversation. I can't wait to hear what happens on Friday night.